Good morning, all. Good morning, students. Good morning, Lakshmi ma'am and Nija. Welcome to another live session for problem solving. This will be based on the practice test that we have conducted on May 30th. So these are some of the important frequently asked questions in AEEE examinations. So I request all the students to attend the session carefully. So it will be helping you a lot in your entrance exam. So if you have any queries, you can just type your queries in Q&A session, and ma'am will make sure that all your queries have been attended. So first of all, I would like to welcome our teacher, Ms. Lakshmi Mohan. She has an ample years of experience in teaching, and currently she is in Amrita School of Engineering. She is teaching the students online. And again, welcome Lakshmi ma'am, and welcome all the students. So I think we can start the session now. Over to you, Lakshmi ma'am.
So thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So I think we can start the session right now. I'll be sharing my screen. So if there is anything, just type in the chat box. I'll be replying to you. Okay. So this session is based on the mock examination. The JEE practice test you have attended on 30th May. And today we'll be concentrating on answering the questions of the physics session. Okay. So I'll share the screen now. Yeah, I think all of you can view the screen. So let's start. So we'll be discussing firstly the physics questions, and after that we can go to the chemistry part. And in this paper, most of the max questions are direct. So I thought I'll be looking at the physics session, and maybe in next week, most probably in the next week, we can conduct a session exclusively for the max. Okay. So we can discuss the questions one by one. The question number 21. Consider a thin square sheet of side L and thickness T, made of a material of resistivity ρ. The resistance between two opposite faces shown by the shaded areas in the figure is. So you can see a diagram here. So they have given it as a square sheet. The sheet is a square sheet. One side of the sheet is given as L and the thickness is given as T. They have also given that it is made of a material with the resistivity ρ. So we have to find out the shaded region's resistance is related to what, whether it is directly proportional to L or proportional to T, whether it is depending on L or T, the distance or the thickness. So I think you can view this page also. Okay. So here we have to find out the resistance. We have studied the formula for resistance. R is equal to rho L by A. Rho is the resistivity, L is the length, and A is the area. Here it is asked to find out the resistance of those shaded portions. Two shaded portions are there. And this whole object is a square, but these shaded portions reflect as a rectangle. So there are two rectangles, they are facing each other. So we know R is equal to rho L by A. Rho is the resistivity, R is the resistance, L is the length, and A is the area. So for this shaded portion, we can find out the area, the cross-sectional area. What is the equation for area? It is length into breadth. So the area becomes, the length L is given and the thickness is given as T. So it becomes L into T. So we have area with us. It is L into T. So substituting for area in the equation, R is equal to rho L by A becomes L into T. So the L, that is the length of the conductor, gets cancelled, and we got the value of resistance as rho by T. Now we can have a look on the option. The resistance is depending on resistivity and the thickness, rho by T. So checking upon the options, it is directly proportional to L. It is not at all depending on L. The value of the length got cancelled. Okay. It is directly proportional to T. It is not directly proportional. It is inversely proportional to T. The next is it is independent of L and independent of T. So it is dependent of T. So the D option also got wrong. So from these options, the correct option will be option C. That is, it is independent of L. The resistance of the two opposite phases will be independent of the length. So here, once again, we can say this. We are given a square, the length is given, the thickness is given, and we are asked to find the resistivity of the material is also given, that is rho, and we are asked to find the resistance. So equation of resistance R is equal to rho L by A. Rho is the resistivity, L is the length, A is the area. We can find out the area of this shaded portion. The shaded portion area is L into T. Substituting this area in the equation, R becomes rho L by L into T. So it becomes rho by T. So from the options, we can find out that the resistance is independent of L. Among these options, the third option is correct. That is, the value of the resistance between these two opposite phases in the shaded region is independent of the length of the conductor L. The correct option is option C. Okay. I think everyone is clear with this. Now let's move to the next question. So compared to the previous exams, this physics section is comparatively easy. You just have to know an idea about the basics, then you can answer these questions very easily. So we can see the question number 22. A biconvex lens of focal length 15 centimeter is in the front of a plane mirror. So we are having a plane mirror and also a biconvex lens. The focal length of the biconvex lens is given as 15 centimeter. And also the distance between the lens and the mirror is also given, that is 10 centimeter. A small object is kept at a distance of 30 centimeter from the lens. We have to find the final image. This is a very simple question. We only need to have an understanding about the mirror formula and how the ray will pass through the mirror and a biconvex lens. And also we need to have an idea about the signs. Then we can easily answer this question. So we are having biconvex lens and a plane mirror. The biconvex lens focal length is given. Distance between length and the mirror is also given. And a small object is placed at 30 centimeter from the lens. We have to find out the final images, whether it is a real image, whether it is a virtual image, and how much is the distance from the mirror. That we have to find out. So, okay. Yeah. So just have a look at this diagram. So this is the lens shown. And we have a mirror here. And in the question, it is given that an object is placed here. It is at O. And we have to find out how the image will be formed. So from this object, the ray goes to this lens and it gets reflected and it will have to be here. The image has to be formed here. So this distance is given as 30 centimeter. And the distance between the lens and the plane mirror is given as 10 centimeter. So this ray goes and it gets reflected and it will go here. So this distance will also be 30 centimeter. So it is given that the lens, the distance between the lens and the mirror is 10 centimeter. So this will automatically be 20 centimeter. So the total distance is 30 centimeter. So this is 10. So this distance will be 20 centimeter. This is the actual case that has to occur, but we are having a plane mirror here. So what will happen? This ray of light will get reflected back. While getting reflected back, there is also a lens here. So it will get reflected back and reaches a point in front of the lens. So this is the concept. So you have to have a clear idea of what will happen to the ray of light that is passing. So the object is placed at O. This will go through the lens and it will get reflected. But there is a plane mirror located here. So it will reflect back. In the front of the mirror, there is the lens. So it will get reflected and reach here. So we have the focal length as 15 centimeter for this. So by applying the lens formula, we know the lens formula. it is 1 by f is equal to 1 by u minus 1 by v. Here, the u is taken as negative because of the direction. It is from the lens to the object. So the value becomes negative. So 1 by 15 is equal to, substituting the value. In this problem, you have to give importance to the sign convention. This is very important in this question. Otherwise, you will get a wrong answer. So 1 by 15 is equal to 1 by v minus 1 by u. That is 1 by v minus 1 by minus 30. So we get the value of v as 30. So the image is formed as 30 centimeter to the right side of the lens. So 20 centimeter in front of the plane mirror and 10 centimeter in front of the lens. So this image is formed at 30 centimeter to the right of the lens, and this image becomes an object to the plane mirror. We have already discussed this. The image is formed at 30 centimeter to the right side of the lens, but that image becomes an object to this plane mirror. So the ray of light will be coming from the back of the mirror, from behind the mirror, and it will move towards the lens. So it will get reflected back and the image is formed here. The image is formed. The image has to form at the position I2, but there is the lens, so it will form at the point I. So here also we have to apply this lens formula. So by the sign convention, the distance we can calculate. The u will become positive. It is given as 10. And the focal length is given as 15. So u is equal to plus 10 and f is 15. So we can easily find the value of v. So substituting the value, 1 by v minus 1 by 10 equal to 1 by 15. So we'll get the value as v is equal to 1 by 6. So it is there in the figure. This distance we got as 6. We have to find out whether the image is a real image or a virtual image. So this image formed as a real image, and it is formed at a distance of how much centimeter from the plane mirror? From the lens, it is 6 centimeter that we have already found out. So this 6 centimeter plus 10, it will be 16 centimeter. So the real image is formed at 16 centimeter in front of the mirror. I think you understood this question. Okay, this is something else. Ma'am, can you please explain? Okay, just a minute. I'll explain this question once again. Okay, just have a look at this. We are having a lens and a plane mirror here. Okay, at a distance of 30 centimeter, we are placing the object here. So this object gets reflected from the lens and it moves back at a distance of 30 centimeter. From the plane mirror, it will be 20 centimeter, and the distance between the lens and the plane mirror is given as 10 centimeter. So first case, we are applying the lens formula. So in the lens formula, 1 by f is equal to 1 by v minus 1 by u. We understood it. So here, this distance is getting calculated from the lens to the object. That's why the sign got negative. So 1 by v minus 1 by minus 30 equal to 1 by 15. We get v as 30. That is, the image will be formed 30 centimeter to the right side of the lens. That is 20 centimeter in front of the mirror. So this image formed can act as an object to the plane mirror. So it will get reflected back, and in front of the mirror, there is a lens also. So it will come to the point I2. Taking the sign and then applying the lens formula once again, we can have the value as 1 by v minus 1 by u equal to 1 by f. That is 1 by v minus 1 by 10 equal to 1 by 15. So we will get the value as 6 centimeter. We have to find out whether it is a real image or a virtual image. The image is formed at this point. It is a real image, and the distance, we got this distance. It is already given in the question as 10 centimeter, and this is 6 centimeter. So it becomes 16 centimeter. So the image formed is a real image, that is 16 centimeter in front of the mirror. So checking among the option, the correct answer for this question is option B. It is real and at a distance of 16 centimeter in front of the mirror. So simply knowing the concept of the mirror formula, having an idea about the mirror formula and how the reflection takes place, we can answer this question. So now let's move on to the next question. All these questions are direct. Okay, just we need to substitute in a simple formula. So the next is question number 23. The coercivity of a small magnet where the ferromagnet gets demagnetized is 3 into 10 raised to 3 ampere per meter. The current required to be passed into a solenoid of length 10 centimeter and the number of turns is given as 100. So we have to find out the current that is passed inside the solenoid so that the magnet will get demagnetized in the solenoid. We have to find out I in this question. So here coercivity, the value is given as 3 into 10 raised to 3 ampere per meter. The length of the solenoid is given as 10 centimeter. The number of turns is given as 100. All the values are given in the question. We need to directly substitute into the formula. Before going, I just need to ask one thing. What is coercivity? It is the intensity of the magnetic field at which the magnet can get demagnetized. So we have the equation for coercivity. We have studied this. H is equal to B by mu 0. H is the coercivity, B is the magnetic field, mu 0 is the permeability of the free space. Here H is the coercivity, B is the magnetic field and mu 0 is the permeability of the free space. So this is the equation for coercivity. We need to find it in terms of current. So we know that for a solenoid, we can write the magnetic field as B is equal to mu 0 into N into I. B is equal to mu 0 into N into I. So substituting this B, magnetic field, in the equation for coercivity, we can have H is equal to mu 0 Ni by mu 0. So the permeability of the free space, mu 0 gets cancelled and we can have the value of H is equal to Ni. So this is written here, H is equal to Ni. H is equal to Ni. Okay. In the question, we have given the length as 10 centimeter. Length of the solenoid is given as 10 centimeter and the number of turns is given as 100. So the length, we can convert it into meter as 0.1 meter. And the number of turns, capital N, is given as 100. We have to find the value of number of turns per unit length. We will denote it as small letter n. The number of turns per unit length is denoted by small letter n, which is equal to capital N by L. N is given as 100, the length is 0.1. So we can find the value of N, that is number of turns per unit length as 1000. So in this equation, H is equal to Ni. We have the value of N and we have the value of H. The value of H is given in the question. It is given as 3 into 10 raised to 3 ampere per meter. In the question, it is given as meter. So that's why we have converted this length into meter. Okay. So directly substituting the value of N and H, we can find out the value of I. So the current is equal to coercivity divided by N. That is, N is the number of turns per unit length. H is 3 into 10 raised to 3 and N is 1000. We already find out. So the current becomes 3 ampere. One thing you need to take care is N is the number of turns that is given in the question as capital N. We have to find the value of number of turns per unit length in order to substitute in the equation. That you need to take care while doing this question. So the intensity of the magnetic field at which the magnet gets demagnetized is the coercivity. We have the equation H is equal to B by mu 0, but we have to find out it in terms of current. So we are substituting the equation for the magnetic field as B is equal to mu 0 Ni. Finding the number of turns per unit length using the number of turns and the length given. We have the value and we just directly substitute the value of the coercivity and the number of turns and we can find out the current. So the answer is 3A. So checking in the option, we can find that the current required to be passed inside the solenoid is 3A. The correct answer is option A. Okay. So I think you are clear with this question. This is a very simple question. You just need to have the basic idea of N, the number of turns, and the equation for the coercivity. So now moving on to the next question. So the next question, question number 24 is, the Earth moves about the Sun in an elliptical orbit. We know that in the solar system, the planets move in the elliptical orbit. So Sun is there and Earth is moving in the elliptical orbit. Okay. As the earth moves closer to the sun, which one of the following best describes the earth-sun system's moment of inertia? This is a very simple question. You don't need any pen and paper. You just have to think and answer this question. So sun is there, earth is moving in the elliptical orbit. So we know that in the case of ellipse, it moves in a way that sometimes it becomes closer to that of the sun. So while moving closer to the sun, what it means? The distance is getting decreased here. And we have to calculate the moment of inertia. What will happen to the moment of inertia when the earth moves to the sun? Let me tell you one thing. We have the equation for moment of inertia, that is I. I is equal to mr square. We know the equation. M is mass and r is the distance or the radius. We can call it as radius. Okay. So I is equal to mr square. M is the mass and r is the radius. So here we can have the mass of earth and sun. In this case, we don't need to consider the mass. Why? Because the mass of sun and earth, they are constant. These values not changing. So from I is equal to mr square, the moment of inertia will depend only on the value of the r, that is the distance. I will depend only on the value of the distance. So when distance gets decreased, the moment of inertia will automatically decrease. I is depending on r square. So when r decrease, the moment of inertia will also get decreased. So the correct answer for this question is A. Just simply have an idea on how we can relate this question with the concept of moment of inertia. So sun is there, earth moves in elliptical orbit. So earth is coming closer to sun. That means the distance is getting reduced. So we have to best describe to the earth-sun system's moment of inertia. Which of the following will happen to the moment of inertia of the earth-sun system? There is no need to think about the mass of the system because they are constant and will not depend on the moment of inertia. They are constant. So if the mass is given and for solving the question, we have to write it as m1, m2, m1, m2 by m1 plus m2. So there is no need to consider that thing here. We can consider it as constant, and it is the concept of distance is only given. Earth is moving closer to the sun. So the distance get decreased. So the moment of inertia will automatically get decreased. So the correct answer for this question is option A. Just a very simple question. So yeah, the value I is mr square. So mass of sun and earth, we can consider that as constant. So in the elliptical orbit, as the distance decreases, the I will also get decreased. When R decreases, I decreases. So the option becomes A. The moment of inertia gets decreased. Okay. So that is okay. Now we'll move on to the next question. Okay. It is question number 25. A mixture A is made by mixing equal volumes of two liquids. Another mixture B is made by mixing equal masses of same liquids. Which mixture has highest relative density? So we are having two mixtures, mixture A and mixture B. Mixture A is made by mixing equal volume of two liquids, mixture B by equal mass of two liquids. Both these liquids are same. Okay. So we have to find out which liquid has higher relative density. So we know that density depends on mass and volume. Density is depending on mass and volume. So I just wrote what concept I have with me. Mixture is A is made by equal volume of two liquid. Mixture B is made by equal mass of two liquid. Then what is relative density? Density of a substance with respect to or with reference to another material. We are mostly given a reference material. We'll mostly use it as water for considering the relative density. So the ratio of density of a substance to the density of a given reference material is mostly the water, is the relative density. So we'll just write down the formula and compare it. It is already understood that the relative density is mostly depending on the volume. So those who know the idea, they can write it as for equal volume of liquid, relative density will mostly depend on the volume of those liquids. Okay. So for mixture A, they are having equal volume. We know that density equal to mass by volume. So for the liquid one, we write it as rho 1 is equal to m1 by v, rho 2 is equal to m2 by v. What is the effective density? Effective density can be written as total mass by total volume. So we just add it and write as rho v, that is they are having equal volume. So I wrote it like that. So rho v is equal to m1 plus m2 by 2v. This mass can be written as rho 1v and this m2 can be written as rho 2v. So it becomes rho 1v plus rho 2v by 2v. So here there is a small mistake. It is equal to rho 1 plus rho 2 by 2. Mixture A is made by equal volume of the two liquids. We know that density equal to mass by volumes. So we are separately writing density of the liquid 1 as mass 1 by volume because volume is same. So rho 1 is equal to m1 by v, m1 by v, and rho 2 is equal to m2 by v. We will find out the effective density rho v as m1 plus m2 by 2v. This m1 or the mass we can replace it as rho 1v and m2 can replace as rho 2v. So the v got cancelled and we'll have, there is a small mistake. This is the equivalent value is equal to rho 1 plus rho 2 by 2. Now we will consider the mixture B. So in the mixture B, it is given that there is equal mass. So M is same, but there is different volume. Volume will be V1 and V2. So the rho 1 is equal to M by V1 and rho 2 is equal to M by V2. So the total will be 2M by V1 plus V2. We can write the volume in terms of mass and density as V1 is equal to M by rho 1 and V2 is equal to M by rho 2. So this M gets cancelled and we can have the density for the equal mass as 2 rho 1 rho 2 by rho 1 plus rho 2. So we have the two values for the mixture A and B. For mixture A, it is having equal volume. It is equal to rho 1 plus rho 2 by 2. And for mixture B, it is having equal mass. So rho M is equal to 2 rho 1 rho 2 by rho 1 plus rho 2. So comparing these values, we can find out that the relative density for the first mixture will be greater compared to that of the second mixture. So rho V will be greater than rho M. Rho V is equal volume and rho M is equal mass. So substituting any values and solving, we can find that the first relative density will be greater compared to that of the second one. Relative density is mostly depending on the volume of two liquids rather than the mass of the liquids. So for two liquids which is having equal volume, the relative density will be greater compared to the mass. So I think this question is clear. So yeah. Which mixture has the higher relative density? Relative density is depending upon the volume of the two liquids. So mixture A will be having the greater value compared to that of the mixture B. Mixture A will have the higher relative density compared to that of mixture B. Okay. So this is a simple question. Just you need to have some calculations, then you can solve it. The next question is question number 26. Consider the curve x equal to a sine of kt with a greater than 0. At which point on the graph is it possible that t equal to 0? So here we are given a graph and the curve x equal to a into sine of kt. They have given that a is greater than 0. They have given the value that a is greater than 0. In this graph, we have to find out at which point on the graph is it possible that t equal to 0. So this is t, this axis, x-axis is given as t and y-axis is x. So have a look at the graph. In the graph, you can see that there are points t1, t2, t3 and t4. And we need to find out when t is 0. There are 2 points at which the value of t can be 0. That is point t1 and t3. Just have a look on the graph. You can see it right. At t1, it can be 0 and also at t3, it can be 0. Now, in the question, it is clearly given that with a greater than 0. So the value should be positive. We have 2 options here for t greater than 0. It is t1 and t3. But it strictly gives a condition that a should be greater than 0. So for considering t1, the value is in the lower portion. So it is negative. For t3, it is in the upper. So the value of the T3 is the answer. You just have to analyze this graph and then you have to answer this question. A curve is given x equal to a sine of kt and the condition is given a has to be greater than 0. And we have to find out at which point on the graph is it possible that t equal to 0. We have got 2 points on the graph at which t equal to 0, t1 and t3. But t1 the value is negative curve. For t3 it is positive. So point t3 is the point at which t equal to 0 with the condition a is greater than 0. So the correct answer for this question is option C, that is point T3. Okay. We don't have much to write to answer this question. We just have to know an idea about the concept. You just have to have an idea about the concept. You have to analyze this question and answer this. So x equal to a sine of kt, a greater than 0. We have 2 points, that is T1 and T3. So for considering the option to be positive, that is a greater than 0, there has to be value. We will consider the point T3. So the point T3 is the correct option, that is option C. Now we will move on to the next question. Okay. Question number 27. The analyzer in front of a plane polarized light is initially at the position of maximum transmission. The analyzer in the front of a plane polarized light is initially at the position of maximum transmission is given here. Okay. As it is rotated steadily from the position, the maximum rate of decrease in the intensity of the transmitted light occurs at an angle. So we are rotating the position. We have to find the maximum rate of decrease in the intensity of the light transmitted. So they are given different angles and we have to find out at which angle the decrease will be maximum. So the angle is 0 degree, 30 degree, 45 degree and 90 degree. Okay. So we have the value that Imax equal to I0 by 2 into cos theta square. So we have different options, different angles given. In option A, it is 0 degree, option B 30 degree, option C 45 degree, and option D 90 degree. So we'll substitute all these and find out the values. So Imax equal to I0 by 2 into cos 0 square, cos 0 1. So the value becomes I0 by 2, which is 0.5I2. In the next angle, it is given as 30 degree. So Imax equal to I0 by 2 into cos 30 whole square. So I0 by 2 into 3 by 4, which is 0.375 I0. In the option C, it is given as 45 degree. The angle is given as 45 degree. So Imax is equal to I0 by 2 into cos of 45. So the value becomes 0.25 I0. Fourth option, the angle is 90 degree. So cos 90 is 0, the value becomes 0. What is asked in the question? We have identified it. The maximum rate of decrease in the intensity of light transmitted occurs at an angle. Maximum rate of decrease in intensity. So we don't need to consider the option D. So in the option A, it is 0.5 I0. Option B, it is 0.375 I0. And option C, it is 0.25 I0. So the maximum decrease in the intensity. So the maximum decrease in the intensity occurs at the angle 45 degree, that is 0.25 I0. So the rate of reduction of intensity will be maximum at the angle of 45 degree. So you have to have an idea about the formula of Imax and you just need to substitute the angles and find out the value. So here the maximum rate of reduction occurs at an angle of 45 degree. So 45 degree is given in the option C. So the correct answer for this question is option C. That is 45 degree. Okay. Simply substituting the angles and finding out the value and analyzing the result obtained. We can answer this question. So the next question is question number 28. At what point charge is the charge per unit area greatest on the surface of an irregularly shaped conducting solid? So we are given an irregularly shaped conducting solid and we have to find out at which point the charge per unit area will be greatest. So all this we have studied in our school. For the irregularly shaped conducting conductor, we have the charge density will be lesser when the radius of curvature is less. So it is related to the radius of curvature of the surface. When it gets low, the density becomes high. So at which point the charge per unit area is greatest on the surface on an irregularly shaped conducting coil? When the curvature is least. It depends upon the radius of curvature. So when the curvature value becomes least, it will be high. So the correct answer is option C. So for an irregularly shaped conductor, the surface charge density will be greatest at those locations where the radius of curvature of the surface becomes the smallest. That is, there is an inverse relation. It is inversely proportional to that of the radius of curvature of the surface. So here it is given in option C that when the curvature is the least. So when the curvature value is the least, the charge per unit area will be greatest on that surface. So the correct answer is option C. All these are strictly based on some theories you have studied. So you have to refresh those theories to answer these questions. Okay. So the next question is a very, very simple question. It is question number 29. Which property is not necessarily true for the electrostatic force between two non-identical charges? You can answer this question if you know the definition of electrostatic force. Which property is not necessarily true for the electrostatic force between two non-identical charges? It is given in the option as it is a conservative force, it is a repulsive force, it is an inverse square law force. Its direction is along the line joining the charges. So what all things we know about electrostatic force, we need to recollect it. In the definition, we have studied that it is a conservative force. So it is true. Then this electrostatic force, we are defining it between the charges. We are defining this between the two charges. So this will act along the line joining these charges. So defining between two charges, its direction is along the line joining the charges. So the option D is correct, option A is correct. Electrostatic force, is it a repulsive force? Yes, it can be repulsive or attractive. So it is a repulsive force. It is inverse square law force. We have the equation E is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon 0 into Q1 Q2 by R square. So it depends upon Q1 Q2 by R square. This can be written as an inverse square law force. So the electrostatic force is an inverse square law force. It is conservative force. It is defined along the line connecting those charges where it is defined. All these are correct. And it can be a repulsive force. But in the question, it is asked that which property is not necessarily true for the electrostatic force between two non-identical charges? It is a conservative force always. It is an inverse square law force always. Its direction is along the line joining those charges. It is also true. But we know that this electrostatic force can be repulsive or attractive. So it is not necessarily true that it will always be a repulsive force. It can be attractive also. It will depend upon the charge, whether it is positive, non-identical charges, whether it is positive or negative. It will strictly depend on that. So from this, we can say that the option B is wrong. It is not actually wrong. It is not necessarily true. It is true, but there is another option that it can be attractive also. So you can answer this question if you have an idea about the electrostatic force. It is a conservative force. It is an inverse square law force and it will act along the line joining the charges. It is a repulsive force and also it can be attractive. But it is not necessary that it is always a repulsive force. It will depend upon the charges, whether it is positive or negative. So the correct answer for this question is option B. Okay. So now moving on to the next question. The energy stored in a parallel plate capacitor filled with a material of dielectric constant K and held at potential V is E. If the potential is doubled and the material of dielectric constant K by 2 is used in between the plates, what is the energy stored? So the energy stored in the parallel plate capacitor filled with the material of dielectric constant K and the potential V is E. So in the next case, what they have given us, they have doubled the potential and the material of the dielectric constant, they have changed the value of K to K by 2. The dielectric constant between the plates, they have changed the value to K by 2. We have to find the energy stored. So we know the equation for the energy stored, E is equal to half into CV square. C is the capacitance and V is the potential difference. So the energy stored in the capacitor can be written as E or U is equal to half into CV square, where C is the capacitance and V is the potential difference. We know that the C can be written as K into C0. That is by considering it as the capacitance of an empty or a vacuum capacitor. So we'll replace the equation as 1 by 2 into KC0 into V square. But in the question, the second condition is given that the potential is doubled and the material of the dielectric constant, that is K, becomes K by 2. So potential is doubled, that is V becomes 2V and K becomes K by 2. So substituting this in the new equation, we have 1 by 2 into K C0, K becomes K by 2. So K by 2 C0, V becomes 2V whole square. So here we need to arrange this in the form of half into CV square. So 2 into 1 by 2 into K into C0 into V square. So 1, 2 we have cancelled and we have to write it in the format of half K C0 V square. So we have 2 into half K C0 V square. That is K C0 is C. So it becomes 2 into 1 by 2 into CV square. So it is 2 times the energy stored. In the option it is given this way. So the value is E, and if the potential is doubled and the material of the dielectric constant K changes to K by 2, then the energy stored will be 2 times. So the answer is 2E. The energy stored will be 2E. So we have to have an idea on the equation. E is equal to half CV square, where C is K into C0. Then substituting the value of K as K by 2 and V as 2V, we can get it as 2 into half into CV square. Okay. So it is 2 times E. 2E means the correct answer for this question is option D. Okay. So now we will move on to the next question. That is question number 31. A circular current loop is placed in an external magnetic field. How is the torque related to the radius of the loop? A circular current loop is placed in an external magnetic field, and how is the torque related to the radius of the loop? So we have the equation for the torque acting on the current carrying loop in the magnetic field. Tau is equal to IAB sin theta, where A is the area, B is the magnetic field, and I is the current. The equation for torque acting on a current carrying loop placed in the magnetic field is tau is equal to IAB sin theta, where B is the magnetic field, A is the area, and I is the current. So here, in the question, it is given that it is a loop. So the area becomes pi r square. So substituting it as tau is equal to I into pi r square B sin theta. We have to find the relation of the torque with that of the radius of the loop. It is equal to r square. We got that relation. So it is directly proportional to the radius square of the radius. So replacing this equation, we can have tau is equal to I into pi r square into B into sin theta. So the tau will be proportional to r square. Tau proportional to r square means it is directly proportional to the square of the radius square. Okay. So the correct answer for this question becomes directly proportional to the radius squared. So the option is option C. Okay. All these are the simple question. You need to have an idea about the concept. You can answer this very easily. Most of these questions are being the previous questions of the AEEE exam. Okay. So now we will move on to the next question. It is question number 32. The direction of the magnetic induction produced at the point XY by the line current moving along the x-axis is. For this, we have to simply use the thumb rule to solve the question. We have to find the direction of the magnetic field, and it is given that the current is moving along the x-axis. The direction of the current is given as moving along the x-axis. And we are given that a point is there in the XY plane. A point is there in the XY plane. We have to find the direction of the magnetic induction of that point in the XY plane. The direction of magnetic induction produced at the point XY by line current moving along the x-axis. So we can use the thumb rule. So here you can see the axis as X, Y, and Z. It is given that in the x-axis there is current. And here a point is there in the XY plane. We have to find the direction of the magnetic induction of the point in the XY plane. So the direction of the magnetic induction will be tangential to the point in the XY plane. So find the tangential point, the tangent. So the direction of the tangential plane means it will be pointing towards the Z axis. Here we are given the three axes X, Y, and Z. Current is moving along x-axis. We have the thumb here, and it is given as a point in the XY plane. We have to find the direction of magnetic induction with respect to this point in the XY plane. So the direction of the magnetic induction with respect to a point in any plane is tangential to that plane. So tangential to the XY plane means it will be along the Z axis. So the magnetic induction will be along the Z axis. So in the question, the options is positive x-axis, y-axis, z-axis, negative x-axis. It is z-axis. The tangent will be, the direction will be the tangent to that of the xy plane. So tangent to the xy plane means it will be in the z-axis. So the correct option is option C. The question number 33 is also a similar question of this type. Here a charge is given. The initial velocity is given as v is equal to iv. It moves in a constant field and the magnetic induction is given as b. B moves along the x-axis. So we have to find the final movement of the charge. It is given that the charge is having an initial velocity v is equal to iv. The I is an x component. So it is also in the x-axis. The velocity is also in the x-axis. The initial velocity v is given as iv. It is also in the x-axis. And it moves with a constant field of magnetic induction b. The direction of the b is also given in the x-axis. So we have the velocity and the magnetic induction in the direction of x-axis. So taking the cross product, it will be I into I, that is 0. So there is no change. The resultant charge will move in the same direction. There is no change in the direction. Nothing occurs because both of them are given in the x-axis only. The initial velocity and also the magnetic induction both are given in the x-axis only. So there is no change in the direction occur while taking the cross product. So the resultant charge will move along the x-axis itself, along the x direction itself. Okay. We are given a charge. It is moving with an initial velocity v equal to iv, and it moves in the magnetic field, constant field b. It moves along the x-axis. So both of these are given in the x-axis. And let me tell you, okay, the force will depend upon the charge, velocity, and the magnetic field. Here there is no details about the charge is given, so we'll consider it as positive. If no details are given, we'll consider it as positive itself. Then the velocity, it is given as iv, that is in the x-axis. The magnetic field is given as in the x-axis. So both are I components along the x-axis. So taking the cross product, it will be 0. So the velocity and also the magnetic induction or the magnetic field B will not affect the direction of the charge. So the charge will move in the direction as it is. So it is in the x-axis. So it will start moving in the x-axis itself. So there is no relation with the charge direction. The velocity and the magnetic field is not having any relation with the axis. So it will move along the x-axis itself. So all these are simple questions. You just need to have an idea about the question, what the concept is, what is behind it. Then you can easily answer these type of questions. All these are previous year EEE questions. So the next is question number 34. So in question number 34, which photon carries the highest momentum? We have to find out which photon carries the highest momentum. So the momentum is depending on which factor? It depends upon the wavelength. So momentum can be given by P is equal to h by lambda. So we have it proportional to 1 by lambda, inversely proportional to the wavelength. The momentum is inversely proportional to the wavelength value. The momentum becomes inversely proportional to the wavelength value. So comparing the options given, there is X-ray photon, ultraviolet photon, infrared photon, microwave photon. Among all these four, the X-ray photon is having the lesser wavelength. So the X-ray photon will have the greater momentum. The momentum is proportional, inversely proportional to that of the wavelength. Out of all the given option, the X-ray photon has the lowest wavelength. So the lowest wavelength one will have the highest momentum. So the X-ray photon will have the highest momentum. So the correct answer for this question is option A, that is X-ray photon. It's just a simple relationship between momentum and the wavelength, that is P is proportional to 1 by lambda. If you know this concept, then you can answer this question. And out of these four, ultraviolet, microwave, infrared, and X-ray, the X-ray has got the lowest wavelength. So the X-ray photon will have the highest momentum. Okay. So now moving on to the next question, question number 35. The variation of thermo EMF as a function of temperature difference T between the junctions is. So the thermo EMF can be expressed as a function of the temperature between the two T junctions, that is between the cold and the hot junction. So what we'll do is we'll maintain the cold junction at a particular temperature and we'll change the temperature at the other side. The temperature of the hot junctions will vary. So varying this and analyzing the values and plotting the graph, we can have the graph of thermo EMF and temperature of hot junction as a parabola. You know the concept of thermo EMF. In the thermo EMF, we are having two junctions, hot and cold. Here, the cold junction is maintained at one temperature, 0 degree, and the temperature of the hot junction is getting varied. So finding the values, we can plot the graph between thermo EMF and the temperature of the hot junction. We get the graph as parabola. So writing the equation of thermo EMF and with the temperature of the hot junction, we can write it as E is equal to alpha theta plus half beta theta square. Here theta is considered as the hot junction temperature. While seeing this equation, we can have an idea that it is a quadratic equation. So in the question, we have to find out which type of equation is it. The variation of thermo EMF as a function of temperature difference T between the junctions is whether it is linear, whether it is inversely proportional to T square, or quadratic. So writing the equation, we can analyze that it is quadratic. The relation becomes quadratic. So the correct answer for this question is option A. That is the relation is quadratic. So these are the questions of the physics section. If if anyone is having any doubts, you can ask, or let me finish the chemistry section also, then we can have a discussion. Okay. So next, moving on to the question number 36. The optically inactive compound from the following is. The compounds are given as 2-chloropropanol, 2-chloropentane, 2-chlorobutane, 2-chloro-2-methyl butane. So here we have to find out the optically inactive compound. What do you mean by an optically inactive compound? So optically inactive compound are those compounds. They don't have the ability to rotate the plane polarized light. They are incapable of rotating the plane polarized light. So what you have to do is you have to draw the structure of all the 4 options given, and you have to find out which one is not having the ability. So here in the options, it is 2-chloropropanol, 2-chloropentane, 2-chlorobutane, 2-chloro, 2-methyl butane. Okay. So among these options, drawing the structure, we can find out that this 2-chloro, 2-methyl butane, it is optically inactive. That it is not having the capacity to rotate the plane polarized light. So here among the options, you have to draw the structure first. So among the options, the correct answer for this question is option D. It is not having the capacity to rotate the plane polarized light. So the option is option D. That is 2-chloro, 2-methyl butane. So now we will move on to the next question. That is question number 37. The correct statement about the synthesis of erythritol, that is CCH2OH4 used in the preparation of the penterythriol tetranitrate, that is PETN. Okay. So we have to find out how the synthesis of erythritol is being made. This is being used in the preparation of penten, that is the penterythriol tetranitrate. So you have to study about the reaction, then only you can answer this question, how the reaction will be. So I'll tell you the option. There is 3 aldol condensations and 1 Cannizzaro reaction. This constitute the synthesis of erythritol. Aldol condensation which occurs 3 times, and also there is a Cannizzaro reaction. So here, okay. So this is the reaction. There is 3 aldol condensation and a Cannizzaro reaction. Here, the ethanol is being reacted with the formaldehyde. This reaction occurs in the presence of the sodium hydroxide, and we can form the hydroxymethyl propanol. This reaction is the aldol reaction, and it occurs thrice. That's why it is called the 3-aldol reaction. So ethanol is reacted with the formaldehyde in the presence of the sodium hydroxide, and we can form the hydroxymethyl propanol. So this is the aldol reaction. It occurs 3 times and it is 3-aldol reaction. And after that, the Cannizzaro reaction occurs. That is the hydroxymethyl propanol that is formed. It gets reacted with the formaldehyde and we can have the erythritol. So this occurs in the Cannizzaro reaction. For answering these chemistry questions, you need to have an idea about the structure and how these reactions are occurring. So the 37, the correct option is option A.
Yeah. Sorry for interfering. I request all the students to provide your feedback. Actually, I have sent them a link in the chat box. You can just click that link and you can provide the feedbacks. And one more request: if you have any queries regarding the session, if you have any doubts regarding any questions, you can type it in the Q&A box, and after the session, ma'am will clear all your queries. Thank you, ma'am. You can continue.
Okay. So this you have to study about the reaction, what is the aldol condensation and what is Cannizzaro reaction. Then only you can have an idea about the synthesis of erythritol. So the next question is a very simple question. Question number 38. Which one of the following is not a greenhouse gas? Which one of the following is not a greenhouse gas? So we know that methane, the options are methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor, nitrogen dioxide. So methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor, all these are greenhouse gases. So the nitrogen dioxide is the option which is not a greenhouse gas. So very simple question. You have the concept with you, just need to refer to the options and answer it. So the correct answer for this question is option D, which is not a greenhouse gas. That is nitrogen dioxide. So the question number 39 is, which one of the following statements is true? Nitrogen forms d-pi bond. Nitrogen forms p-pi bond. Nitrogen has vacant d orbital. Nitrogen forms p-pi bond. So we know that nitrogen, the bond that nitrogen forms is p-pi bond. Okay. So nitrogen will form this pi bond with itself or with the other elements. This is due to the small size and the electronegativity, higher electronegativity property of this nitrogen. So the p orbitals can easily overlap with the other orbitals and they are forming the p-pi bonds in the nitrogen. So all these are very simple questions. Okay. So here nitrogen forms the p-pi bond. So the next question is, Williams synthesis of ether is an example of. What do you mean by Williams synthesis and what is the example? So in this question, there is a small change in the option. The correct option is option D, that is nucleophilic substitution. So I'll tell you. So Williamson synthesis is used in the synthesis of ethers. It can be symmetrical or unsymmetrical. So for this ether synthesis, this Williams synthesis method is being used. So here it is an SN2 reaction. That is an alkoxide ion with an alkyl halide. The reaction occurs in this way. So I have just written down the reaction, how it occurs. So this is a nucleophilic substitution reaction. That is, alkoxide ion is the nucleophile. So it displaces the halide ion from the alkyl halide and we are getting an ether. Here what is happening is an electrophile is getting attacked by the nucleophilic. Here the nucleophilic substitution is occurring and it is the bimolecular nucleophilic substitution. So in the option it is given as nucleophilic substitution. So you just have to opt it, nucleophilic substitution. It is actually a bimolecular nucleophilic substitution reaction. So these are the questions of the physics and chemistry. So compared to the last set of sessions, these questions were very easy. All these physics and chemistry questions, you don't have to do a lot of work with pen and paper. You just have to have an idea about how these questions are. About the concept, you can just read out the questions and answer this. There is not much to work with pen and paper. You just have to have an idea about the question, read out the question and check the options and then answer this.
There is a query from one of the student. He's asking why water vapor is greenhouse gas.
Just a minute. It can contribute to the warming. That is the reason. Actually, it is in the question number 38. Which of the following is not a greenhouse gas? We know that methane, carbon dioxide, both are greenhouse gases. Then water vapor and nitrogen dioxide is given. Water vapor can be considered as a greenhouse gas as they are contributing to the warming purpose. So that's why they are being considered as the greenhouse gas.
And there is one more query. 1 second.
Maximum reduction is not at angle 90 degree because at 90 degree, the value we got is 0. So there is no reduction occurring. From the value we got the answer as 0, it means that there is no reduction occurring. So that's why it is not considered. How much reduction? Imax is equal to 0 times I0. So that's why that is not the option.
Yeah, one of the students is asking how the mass of liquid and the volume of liquid differs.
Mass and volume.
Yes, mass of the liquid and the volume of the liquid differs. I think it is from the first session.
Yeah. Mass means simply there is a difference between mass and volume. Mass means how much of that volume can be termed as the space, how much space it is covering. Mass is how much the quantity is, how much the amount of the liquid is with which it is made of, and volume will be in the shape of how much space it is taking up, how much space that liquid is taking up. So there is a difference between mass and volume. Mass is the quantity of the stuff, and volume depends on the space or the shape of that.
And Nakul Ram is asking, what is nucleophilic substitution?
Okay, nucleophilic substitution, that was a question in chemistry. Okay, Williamson's reaction. Just a minute. So in the nucleophilic substitution reaction, it is mostly for the preparation of the, okay, I'll just take the option and I'll answer. It is mostly for the preparation of ethers we are using. We are using the nucleophilic substitution reaction, the Williamson synthesis, for the preparation of ethers. What is actually happening in the nucleophilic substitution is that we'll take the electron pair. Here in this question, you can see that in the option, you can see that we'll take the electron pair and it is being leaving from the group. So a substitution operation is occurring in this. So in this option, you can see that there is an alkyd ion. It is a nucleophile and it gets displaced by a halide ion from the alkyl halide. So there is a substitution reaction that is happening in this that's why it is called as nucleophilic substitution. It is a nucleophile which is being replaced by another pair. One is getting replaced by another.
And Sushmita wants to have some queries on question number 36. She's asking, we say optically active or inactive based on plane of symmetry. Question number 36.
Okay, just a minute.
Yes.
The optical active or inactivity. It is based on their capacity to rotate the, okay. Yeah. It is question number 36. Yeah. It is based on rotation. Whether it is capable of rotating or whether it is not capable. So among these options, the 2-chloro-2-methyl-butane is the only one which is not able for rotation. So that's why it becomes the answer.
So Sai Kiran wants to know about Cannizzaro reaction.
Cannizzaro reaction. Okay. Okay, it is a question number 37. It is a part of the erythriol synthesis. That is CCH2OH4, how the synthesis occurs. So this is done in two parts. The first one is aldol condensation and the next one is Cannizzaro reaction. So the product which is formed after the aldol condensation, what we are doing is, it is reacted with the formaldehyde to form the erythritol. So this is the Cannizzaro reaction. It is a part of the erythritol production, synthesis of erythritol. So the first step is aldol condensation. So in the aldol condensation, the ethanol is reacted with the formaldehyde, and that is in the presence of the sodium hydroxide, and will form the hydroxymethyl propanol. And after that, this hydroxymethyl propanol reacts with the formaldehyde, and the compound we get as a result is erythritol, that is CCH2OH4.
Okay. Vimal has a query in question number 35 also.
Okay. The variation of thermo EMF as a function of temperature difference T between the junctions is. So here, to answer these questions, we need to have an idea of thermo EMF. So we are having two junctions, that is the cold and hot junction. So what we are going to do is, we are maintaining one junction at a temperature and varying the temperature at the other junction. And we need to find out how the change will occur, how the thermo EMF with the temperature change occurs, how it will be. So on plotting the values, we take different values and plotting those values, we can have the graph as a parabola. So the thermo EMF and the hot junction temperature, we'll find the equation for them as a quadratic equation. A is equal to alpha theta plus half beta theta square, where theta is the hot junction temperature. So we can see this equation as a quadratic equation. So the correct answer is option A.
Okay. Yash is asking, is water vapor a greenhouse gas due to its high specific heat capacity?
Actually, it remains less time. It absorbs more heat, and that's why it is being called as a greenhouse gas. It helps in the process of that warming. And one more thing I need to tell you, if you want this data, you can just mail me. I can forward this data to you. Okay.
Anyway, students, we will be uploading this this link in our CBT portal, the same portal where you are attending a JEE practice test, cbtpractice.in. So you can visit this website. Anyway, tomorrow we do have one practice test. As every Sunday we do have at 4 o'clock. So you can register if you are not registered, you can register at www.amritacbtpractice.in. I will just type it in the chat box.
We'll take separate sessions for mathematics. I saw one query like that. So we'll take separate section for mathematics. So mostly the next session will be of maths.
Yeah, sure. We'll be having maths session also. So don't worry. So regarding this recorded videos, we will be uploading it in the our website, our JEE practice portal, www.amritacbtpractice.in. So you can do check after 2 to 3 days because it will take some 1 or 2 days. It will be taking time. So you can probably by Monday or Tuesday you can check it. You can have this entire session. So I think it was a good session, and thank you, Lakshmi, so much for helping the students to solve these problems. And I know that you do have a lot of queries coming regarding the it's more for AEEE entrance examination phase 3. So we are conducting a lot of webinars and a lot of sessions for clearing all your doubts regarding this AEEE phase 3. So do just check your mail frequently, okay? So we'll be having webinars by this month and next month initially also. So at that and during those webinars, you will be getting good awareness about the AEEE, how to write this entrance examination, what is remote proctored, and all those stuffs. So do check your mails regularly, and please attend the webinars as we are as the time we are allotting. So again, I request all the students to I have shared one link for the feedback also. So please submit the feedback because it will be helpful for us also, so that if there is any changes that is required, we can improve in next session also. So every week we'll be having these type of sessions, and do attend the sessions without any fail, because it will help you in your all the entrance examination, especially AEEE, because these are some of the frequently asked questions. So it will be helping you very high. So mandatorily you just attend the sessions. So if you have any queries, you can just mail to us. You can mail to ma'am also. So if there is any query, it will be solved as soon as possible. So anything else, ma'am? Can we wind up?
Yeah, we can wind up.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lakshmi ma'am, for your time. And thank you, students. All the best. Study well. This is going to be the last phase of Amrita AEEE examination. So attend well. Just check your mails. Our willingness is open. Just submit your willingness. Probably by this week last week, our slot booking will be opening for AEEE exam also. So book the slot on time and don't miss the chance. So thank you so much. Thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you, Nija, for conducting this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.